What's up guys, Joe Rock here with our 21st Xamarin Android tutorial. And in this tutorial what we're going to be doing is wrapping up our web requesting, and more specifically what we're going to be looking at is retrieving the data from the server that we've been entering in the data in the last couple tutorials. Okay, so obviously it's really important to not only send data to the server but to seamlessly let the user retrieve data back to their phone on load. Okay, so this is what we're going to be looking at is just doing it with the web request, but we're going to be downloading instead of uploading some files, and we're going to do that with doing that with JSON. Okay, so we're going to look into some REST APIs and mainly just encoding some JSON on the PHP backend and then deserialize it on the client side. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do all that, and this is a common way to do things in Xamarin with .NET and using some libraries on the client side and communicating with PHP. So let me show you in a little example of what I got here. Remember, if you were following along in the last couple tutorials, what we had to do is every time we loaded the application, we had to reinsert contacts. Okay, so all the contacts were all in memory. But notice now that when it loaded up, we have 3 contacts that loaded up automatically. Okay, and these contacts correlate with what is in our database right here. Okay, so you got Bob, Tom. Bob has no image, so it's null. So that makes sense. Just the default image, and here's a couple other custom images that I just downloaded onto the emulator. Okay, so now we have a way to retrieve the data seamlessly for the user to get back into view. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you guys how to do that. Go ahead and close this out. Okay. So the first thing we're going to want to do is the Oncreate method is what's called in this activity first. So obviously that makes sense to put any kind of first action like loading the data or calling upon an asynchronous method to load the data to do it here. Okay, so go ahead and open up that. All right, so we're going to want some global variables. Okay, and we're going to want to make them global mainly for the fact that we're gonna, if we want to call upon them again anywhere in any of these methods, we can, like such as if you want to refresh the data later on, you guys might want to make the refresh method in some way, then you just go ahead and call upon this asynchronous method again, and that's all you need to do. And that's what's really nice about that. Okay, if you didn't, then you have to recreate the client, recreate the URL, and all that stuff. Okay, oops, I'm sorry guys, that didn't make sense. Progress bar. Okay, and we're going to need that for the progress bar that shows up right away, and then it'll disappear once the data is there. Okay, and that's just obviously a way just to give some feedback to the user to let them know that to wait and the application has not froze. Okay, all right, so client, we're going to want a web client again, and we're going to want a URL. All right, so what we want to do here is we want to actually instantiate some of this. Okay, so let's make a new web client. And this, by the time you guys have been following along in the previous tutorials, this should be pretty routine by now. Once again, I'm using my IP address on my LAN. Okay, so be sure to change this to whatever IP address that you need to use to get to your server. Okay, and I'm calling it getContacts.php is the file that we'll be calling. All right. And the next thing we're going to want to do is we want to actually call that file. Okay, and we'll use download data async, and it just takes a URI. Okay, so which is the URL that we can pass in. All right, and that's because we don't need any parameters to give it to select all the context. Okay, we could, and in that case, if you guys want to do that, if you guys need to send parameters, do what we did in the previous tutorials, where we use the upload data async, and that'll take the name value collection that we've been using. Okay, but right now we don't need to get anything. It's just going to echo out a whole bunch of JSON. So then we just need to download that. Okay, so that's going to call it. And the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to subscribe to an event that is called when the data is here. Okay, when it's finished downloading. Alrighty, so okay, that's all good. It's going to call the client. Put call the client, call the PHP file. All right, now notice that I put a progress bar up here. So we haven't yet made that progress bar inside of the AXML file. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so right now we just have a list view, and we want the progress bar to be inside of the middle, in the middle of the parent, and then once the list view comes, the progress bar disappears, and then the data is displayed. So that's the ideal situation that we want to be in. But the linear layout, if we put a progress bar now, and I'll show you what I mean. Also remember that we do have a progress bar. Move that over. We do have a progress bar here, remember in the dialog. So I'm just going to go ahead and reuse that just to save some time, okay, instead of writing it out or anything. It has most of the same properties that we need. So let's go ahead and copy and paste that and put it over here. And we don't need a layout below. There is no button create contact in this case, okay? And we want it to be actually visible by default. We want it to be shown, and then we'll make it disappear once the data is there, okay? So let's see what we get. And notice that the progress bar doesn't show up, okay? And I wanted to show you guys that, so the next thing I do here, you'll understand why I'm doing it. And I want to make this a relative layout, because a linear layout will stack elements vertically in this case. We want to actually not do that. We want to actually center the progress bar inside of the middle of it, okay? So the way we do that is make it a relative layout, and then inside of a relative layout, you can do layout center and parent to true, and that parent is the relative layout in this case. And then now our progress bar is right here in the middle, okay? So, you know, I try to make sure that I don't just do stuff and then you guys are like, what the heck's going on? Some of you guys might understand, some of you guys may not, but I feel the best way to learn is to really not just do this, but to really mess up a little bit and, you know, figure things out. That way, if it happens to you, you'll kind of look back and be like, oh yeah, I remember why that happened, and then be able to fix it. Because if you just keep seeing, you know, all this stuff that's, you know, it's perfect, this is how you do it, then you're never going to kind of see or mess up on your own. And, or, you know, if I mess up, then I can maybe fix it, and then, you know, the next time you guys might make the same mistake, you can fix it quickly in 2 minutes instead of 2 hours. Because trust me, that does happen sometimes, and it might be something simple, but happens to everyone. But to me, it's just the best way to learn. And so sorry for being too over informative, I guess, but hopefully that proves helpful, this kind of teaching in the end. Okay, so all right, we're all good there. Now let's go ahead and close our design files. And now that we have that, we can bring in and instantiate this progress bar through our layout. Progress bar. Okay, spelled that wrong. Okay, so now that we have our progress bar, we have all this going on. Now is a good time to go inside of our get contacts.php, and I want to go over that just a little bit, okay? Now, this is pretty routine by now, getting a connection, making a connection. If there's not a connection, echo that out. Otherwise, our connection to our server was good, which you want to start the query, which is a really simple query. All we are is selecting all from the context table, and we're ordering by ID, okay? And this is where we execute the query. If it doesn't execute right, we fail it. Otherwise, we come over here, everything is good. So here's where it gets interesting, okay? We make a contacts array. So this is going to hold all the contacts, okay? And then now here, we have every contact. It'll loop through for each contact. So in our case, remember there's 3 contacts, Bob, Tom, and Sam, okay? So it's going to loop through it 3 times, all right? And then when it does that for each contact, it's going to get the ID, the name. It's going to make an associative array with the ID string as a key, and then contacts ID as the value, name as a key, contacts, the actual name as a value. And what I do want to point out is really important is why we're actually, this isn't just coincidence that when I do ID, name, number. These names have to correlate exactly to this over here. Okay, let me kind of see if I can move this around just so you guys can see this at once. All right, notice how there's an ID, name, they all match exactly, okay? And the library that we're going to use for JSON requires that these match exactly. So once they do, it'll actually instantiate a contact for you, and everything else is taken care of for you. It's a really slick library. but these do have to match up. And the image base 64 is going to be the image while it's still encoded in base 64, and we're going to make that properly shortly. Okay, but if this was like name D, that's not going to work. Okay, so we want to make sure that this is exactly the same as over here. All right, so just want to point that out. Very important stuff. Now, once we have a contact, we make a contact, and then we want to push it onto our contacts array. So we take the contact and we add it to the contacts. Okay, so now it's got one. Do it again. We got two contacts, and it's got three contacts. Now the contacts array has all three contacts in our case, and then it goes over here, and then JSON encodes it, which is a PHP method. This is a built-in PHP method that encodes the contacts. Okay, and then it spits it out, and then that's the way we download it. We use the client on the client side to deserialize it and add that to our adapter, and it's all good. Okay, video's done. Thanks, guys. No, I'm just kidding. If only it was that easy. I'll just explain it, do it less. Okay, so I'm just kidding, guys. We're gonna go over all that right now, but I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page there. Okay, guys. All right, so let me show you real quick what the JSON is going to look like in our case. Okay, so right now I just pulled up my browser 192.168 blah blah and get contacts, and this is what came out. This is going to be our JSON. So for those of you that are familiar with JSON, this is basically how JSON looks. Okay, it's just basically a big associative array full of just a whole bunch of key value pairs. Okay, and this is what it is. Image base 64. This one has nothing. This one, image base 64, has the 64-bit encoded image file, all that good stuff. Okay. And a good little tool I like to use is something called the Json Validator. Because sometimes, like, if your JSON's not in correct format, you'll be getting errors, and you're like, what the heck's going on? Oh my god, everything's broken. But come into here, just paste it, and it'll tell you if it's valid in the valid JSON format. Okay? Which, okay, yeah, right here, it's actually a little easier to read. And that's good. So our JSON is valid. Okay? So it just matches up ID, name, number, ID, name, number, ID, name, number, shows you their values, and then everything's good. All right. So basically, it's just a big associative array with key value pairs. All right. Just think of it that way. I like to think of it that way. It makes it a little simpler. So just a little, this little side note there. Okay. So now that we have our JSON, we can come into here. And what we want to do is, this is the remember the method that is called when the image is, or I'm sorry, and the whole JSON array is taken in, the JSON object. Okay, so we want to make sure that we do it on the UI thread. So run on UI thread. All right, and here we'll make a new action, just some C# syntax. Okay, so this is going to run on the UI thread, anything inside of these curly brackets. Okay, so we want to first retrieve the JSON. Okay, and this is just going to be a string. That's all it is. Okay, so the way we do it is we do UTF-8. All right, get string, and it takes a byte array, which is the result is returned in a byte array. Okay, and it takes that and puts it into a string. Okay, so now this whole thing is this whole thing. Okay, now we need the library to essentially deserialize the JSON. Okay, and this is where .NET is really handy, because there's a lot of great libraries for JSON. The one I'm going to use is this one over here, is Newton.json. Okay, and the way you get that is pretty simple. I already have it, but I'll show you. Is you just right click it and manage Nougat references. The Nougat will come up, and then usually a lot of times this is the first one, but if you want to search for, just search for like JSON. We'll just do JSON, and then there it is. Okay, all you gotta do is click that, install it, and then everything else is good for you. Okay, everything else is done for you. Okay, and we can thank James Newton King for this. Great library. He did a great job at this, and it's really awesome. I love this library. It's really good. Very popular library, JSON parser for .NET. Okay, James Newton King. All right, so go ahead and download that. It'll add a reference just like so, right here. Yeah. And once you have that, come into here, and here's where we actually parse it. Okay, so we do mContacts. Okay, remember mContacts is just a list of contacts. Okay, and what we do is we do JSON convert. All right, import that using newtonsoft.json. So JSON convert dot deserialize object. Okay, and we want to give it a template, which mContacts is a list of contacts. Okay, so we got to tell this method that it's going to be a list of contacts. All right, and then the actual string that we're going to want parsed, and contact singular. Okay, so whatever you're going to want, whatever this is, make sure that you put that inside of the less than equal than brackets. Okay, so just a simple way to put it. Now this is actually going to parse out everything, and in our contacts it knows, remember that we correlated this with our ID, name, and number. Okay, and here's where we want to actually add our class, our image base 64. Okay, so let's do that here. Remember we had a base 64, so we're gonna have two kind of images. We're gonna have one that's base 64, and then we're gonna have one that after it's decoded, okay, in the actual byte array. Okay, so we'll have a private get variable, which just means that get can only be called within its class. Okay, and we'll have the image. Okay, so now this guy's gonna do a little more work now. Okay, so we're just gonna have a get. All right, so remember properties are just fields with logic inside of them. Okay, so we're gonna add, these are just not, there's nothing logic to them, so we just do get set, but this one's actually gonna have some logic in it. Okay, and it's first gonna check whenever it's called upon. We're first gonna check to see is base 64 does not equal, so if it's not empty and it is not null. Okay, so we just want to make sure that those things aren't empty or null before we return anything. We want to make a byte array because this is what's going to be returned. Remember, a byte array. And we want to use the convert method that .NET provides. Okay, that's just convert from base 64 string image base 64. Okay, so that's what's given back from the PHP code is a 64 string. And remember, that's what's over here. What's going on right here. Remember, our image is encoded, so it's encoded in base 64. Okay, image base 64. So right here we know that it's an encoded base 64, so then we want to, from base 64, convert it back to a byte array. All right, and we just want to return the image. Otherwise, we just want to return null. If it does equal string or empty string, if it is null, then just return null. Okay, so there's our logic there. All is well there. Okay, so we can close that out. And that's going to correlate with this. So now our contacts is going to be a list of contacts. 3 contacts in our case, remember, because of our 3 contacts here. Okay, so let's go back over here and let's finish this off. We're going to actually, instead of doing it here now, make it an action. And remember, we're setting up an adapter and having that adapter's list views adapter attached to this adapter. We're going to do all that now inside of this method because we don't want to do any of that until the data is loaded and ready to be instantiated. Okay, so sorry guys. Okay, so we make the action and we make the adapter with the contacts. Okay, and all is done. That's all that's done for us. Okay, and we no longer need to make a new list of contacts because the JSON library will do all that for us. We simply need to show that it's a list of contacts, and now after this moment we'll have 3 contacts, and then we just want to send that to the adapter as usual. And the last thing we want to do is, don't forget, is we want to set the visibility of our progress bar to gone. Okay, so the data is loaded at this point because of the adapter that the list view now has. So then we want to set it to gone, and then everything will show up and the progress bar will go away. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run this, and let's make sure that everything is working the way that we intended it to. Bring that up. So what should happen is it should call upon the download async method as soon as it creates the view, okay, and start loading the data. Yeah, and there you have it. Okay, so all 3 contacts were loaded pretty quickly and put into our contacts list view, okay, automatically. Okay, so let's just a step through it, make sure that we're on the same page. Is it called the client, downloaded data as sync, and it did some other stuff. So this is on a different thread now. As soon as it was done downloading, it says, okay, now I have all the information. I have the JSON. Okay, I now have this huge JSON. Actually, it isn't that big because it's way bigger, but I have this huge string. So what do I do with it? Okay, so it gets called, this guy gets called automatically because we're subscribed to it. And in this, it'll run on the UI thread, and it'll take the JSON, deserialize it, and add that, and it'll make a list of contacts in which we pass over to our adapter as normal. Now we don't have to make any contacts manually. It already did that for us, and it makes an adapter, sets the adapter here, and makes the progress bar gone, and the data is now there and ready to be used however the user wants. Okay, so that's pretty much it, guys. I hope that you guys now understand somewhat more on a little more now of what's going on with the web request and just a few different ways how to use it. In the next tutorial, what I'm going to do is I'm going to you might notice if you have some high resolution pictures that the data is loading really slowly. You might have a out of memory exception. So what we're going to do is we're going to want to scale down some of the images. I'll show you how to do some stuff in the background with a background worker to decode some of the images, because like if you do like a decode stream, remember this method right here. This takes a long time if you do have a huge image. So I'll show you how to do that asynchronously, speed up things, make things more efficient. And it really just depends on what you're using the application for. Are you just needing thumbnails? Are you needing the whole resolution of the picture? If you just need thumbnails, why not just stay with this? So we can do a few things here. And then one thing I did want to point out, if you guys were getting an error in the other ones, sorry that I did forget, down at this method right here. So this method right here, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add a few more parameters. And I must have forgot to add this to the other tutorials, so I do apologize for that. But we do want to add no padding and the options, and that's really critical because the options in just decoded bounds, if you remember, sets this, when we set this to true, it basically says don't load this in memory. We just want to check out how big, how wide and how high it is, okay? And we want to check those height and widths and then determine if we actually do want to load it into memory, okay? So I wasn't sending those options in, so it was actually loading this into memory. And then here it was actually loading this into memory. So I was getting like a Java language out of memory exception, and that was because I was loading it into memory twice, okay? And so we should have had this third parameter method called, which doesn't load into memory, it only checks out the width and size, and then here we actually scale it down to what we want, okay? So really sorry about that, guys. I did forget to add these 2 parameters, so if you guys were having some errors, add this in, and you should be in a little better shape, okay? So, but in the next tutorial, we'll go a little more into how to decode some stuff in the background and to how to work with stuff like that a little more efficiently than we are right now. All right? Thanks for watching, guys.